I knew something was wrong the moment the phone kept ringing. My daughter. Emily had always answered my calls. Always, even when she was busy at work. She would send a quick message, "Dad, I'll call you tonight." At that Monday morning, the phone rang and rang until it went quiet. I told myself she was just busy. People have lives, jobs, meetings, still. Something about the silence felt heavy, so I called again that evening. No answer. The next morning, I tried again, straight to voicemail. That was when the feeling in my chest started to grow. It wasn't panic yet, but it was close. Emily had always been the responsible one when she was little. She would line up her toys neatly on the shelf before bed, while other children left chaos behind them. Emily liked things calm and orderly. Her teachers used to say she had an old soul. I used to joke that she got that from me. After my wife passed away 15 years ago, Emily became my quiet companion. We spoke almost every day, not about anything dramatic, just life. What? She cooked for dinner, a problem at work, a neighbor who played music too loudly, small things, but those small things meant everything. So, when a whole day passed without hearing her voice, it felt wrong. By Wednesday evening, I drove past her apartment. Didn't want to appear worried. I just wanted to. Checked her car was parked. Outside, that should have been reassuring, but somehow it made things worse. The lights inside her apartment were off. I stood outside the wall building for a few minutes, staring up at her window. Nothing moved, no shadow, no light, just darkness, I told myself. She might be traveling. Maybe she left in someone else's car. Maybe she forgot to tell me still. Emily never forgot things like that. Thursday morning came. I called again. Voicemail. I listened to her recorded message 3 times. "Hi, this is Emily. I can't answer right now." Her voice sounded so normal, so calm, that something in my stomach felt cold. I decided to call her husband, Daniel. They had been married for 6 years, at least. That was what I told people in truth. I had never trusted him completely. He always smiled too easily, spoke too smoothly like a salesman who never turned the charm off when I called him. He answered immediately. "Hey, Robert," he said. His voice sounded relaxed. Too relaxed. "Have you spoken to Emily this week?" I asked. There was a pause. Just a small one. Then he laughed softly. "She's probably just busy with work. She hasn't answered her phone in days." I said. Another pause. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "Oh, she's been staying with a friend for a few days." "A friend?" I asked. Yes, she needed some space. Space. That word felt strange. Emily never mentioned anything about needing space. Not from me, and certainly not from life. "Which friend?" I asked. Daniel hesitated again. "Oh, someone from work," he said it quickly. Too quickly. I didn't push further, but something inside me shifted. Friday arrived. 5 days without hearing from my daughter. I barely slept that night. Every small noise in the house woke me. The ticking clock, the refrigerator, humming, the wind touching the windows. By morning, I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. So, I drove back to her apartment. The same car was still parked outside, exactly where it had been before. That was when I noticed something strange. Her mailbox was overflowing. Letters, magazines, a small package. Emily never let mail pile up, never. I walked up to her apartment door. I knocked 3 slow knocks. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. No television, no footsteps. Nothing. The hallway felt colder. Somehow, I stood there for almost a minute before making the call. It was the hardest phone call I had made in years. "Hello," the dispatcher said. "My name is Robert Hayes," I said quietly. "I'm worried about my daughter." A police car arrived. 2 officers stepped out. One younger, one older. The older officer spoke gently. "When did you last hear from her?" "Sunday evening," I said. He nodded slowly. "Has this happened before?" "Never." The younger officer knocked on the door, several times loud. This time, still nothing. They tried calling her phone, inside the apartment. We heard it ring. That sound made the hallway feel suddenly very small. The phone was inside, but Emily wasn't answering. The older officer looked at me. "We may need to request entry," he said. My hands felt numb. He spoke into his radio. Another patrol car arrived shortly after. A building manager came with a master key. Everyone stood quietly in the hallway. The moment felt strangely calm. Calm. Manager slid the key into the lock. For a moment, no one moved. Then the officer nodded. "Go." Ahead, the door opened slowly. The living room was dark. The air inside felt still. The younger officer stepped in first, then the other. I stayed in the hallway. I didn't want to see. Something I could never forget. A few seconds passed. Then the younger officer's voice came from inside. "Sir." His tone was not alarmed, but it was confused. The older officer walked deeper into the apartment, then he stopped. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, the older officer said something. Quietly, something that made the hallway go completely silent. "Sir, you should come look at this." My legs felt heavy as I stepped inside, and when I saw what was sitting on Emily's kitchen table, I realized my daughter hadn't disappeared. She had been trying to tell me something. And no one had listened. Part 2 approximately equals 1100 words. The apartment felt colder than it should have. Not the kind of cold that comes from an open window or broken heater. It was the kind of cold that comes from silence. Emily had always kept her home warm. There was usually soft music playing, a candle on the table, the smell of coffee or soup. But now the apartment felt untouched, still almost frozen in time. The officers stood beside the kitchen table, looking down at something carefully arranged in the center. When I stepped closer, I saw it, a large brown envelope. My name was written on the front in Emily's handwriting, for Dad. My hands began to shake before I even touched it. The older officer looked at me. "Gently. Take your time," he said. I opened the envelope. Slowly inside were several sheets of paper, neatly organized, carefully folded. That was Emily. Even when something serious was happening, she stayed organized. The first page was a letter. Her handwriting was steady, but I could see where the pen had pressed harder in certain places. I began reading. "Dad, if you were reading this, it probably means you came looking for me. Sorry for worrying you. I didn't know who else I could trust." He just tightened. The room seemed to grow quieter. I didn't tell you earlier because I hoped things would improve. I kept believing Daniel would change, but he didn't, and now I'm afraid of what he might do next. My hands froze. One of the officers glanced at me. "Is everything all right?" he asked softly. I nodded. Though it didn't feel true, I continued reading. "Daniel has been lying about money for almost a year. At first it was small things. Strange charges on the credit card. Money missing. From the joint account. When I asked him, he said it was business. Investments. He always had an explanation." Felt my jaw tighten. That smooth voice of his suddenly echoed in my memory, the easy smile, the polished answers. But 3 months ago, I found something. Worse, he took out loans in my name, large ones. I didn't sign the papers, but somehow my name was there. My heart began beating harder. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them asked quietly, "Financial fraud?" I nodded slowly, but the letter wasn't finished, not even close. I confronted him at first. He denied everything. Then he became angry. I've never seen him like that before. He said if I reported it, I would destroy both our lives. Kitchen felt smaller with every sentence. Emily had been carrying all of this alone. I started collecting documents, bank statements, loan papers, emails, everything. Reached deeper into the envelope, and there they were. Copies of financial records, loan agreements, printed emails. Each one highlighted, each one marked with Emily's careful notes. She had been building a case quietly, methodically, just like she did with everything in life. But then I reached the final page of the letter, and my stomach dropped. Dad, if you are reading this, it means I probably had to leave quickly, Daniel. Discovered I was gathering documents yesterday. He searched my office while I was at work. He didn't say anything when I got home, but I could tell he knew. I felt the air leave my lungs. The officers leaned closer. I packed a bag tonight. I'm going to stay somewhere safe until I speak with a lawyer? Didn't tell you because I didn't want Daniel coming to your house? But if anything happens, everything you need is in this envelope. My eyes moved to the final line. The words were written more slowly, as if she had paused before finishing. I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid of what he might do when he realizes I won't stay quiet anymore. The room stayed silent for several seconds after I finished. The younger officer spoke first. Do you know where she might have gone? I shook my head slowly. No. The truth was, I had a feeling. Emily had always gone to one place when she needed to think. A small lake about an hour outside the city. My wife used to take her there when she was a little girl. After my wife passed away, Emily sometimes drove there alone. She said it helped her clear her mind. The older officer nodded thoughtfully. Sir, he said gently, we should also speak with the husband. The word husband sounded strange now, heavy like a title that didn't belong anymore. That evening, the police visited Daniel. I wasn't there, but the officer called me. Afterward, his voice sounded very different than before. More serious, Mr. Hayes, he said. Yes, we spoke with Daniel Carter. There was a brief pause. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. He claims Emily left 3 days ago after an argument. The strange part came next. He also said she took several important financial documents with her. I closed my eyes slowly. Emily hadn't taken the documents. They were sitting in my hands, exactly where she left them, officer. I said quietly. Yes. I believe my daughter knew something much bigger was happening. What do you mean? I looked down at the thick stack of financial papers on the table. Emily hadn't just gathered a few bank statements, she had gathered everything. Loan numbers, transaction histories, emails between Daniel and several unknown accounts. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly more. This wasn't just reckless spending. It looked like something else. Something planned. The officer spoke again. Mr. Hayes, there's one more thing. My stomach tightened. What is it? When we spoke with Daniel, he asked something unusual. What did he ask? He asked if we had already been inside the apartment. Silence that followed felt very long because that meant something important. Daniel didn't expect anyone to see the envelope. He didn't expect anyone to find them. Documents, he believed Emily had taken them, which meant he had no idea the truth was already sitting in police evidence bags. And for the first time since the phone stopped ringing that Monday morning, I realized something. Emily hadn't just left clues. She had left a trap. And Daniel had no idea he was already standing inside it. Part 3 approximately equals 1100 words that night. I barely slept. The envelope sat on my kitchen table, spread open under the soft light of the lamp. Page after page of documents, bank statements, loan agreements, emails, all of them carefully organized in Emily's neat handwriting, I kept thinking, about something she wrote in the letter. Everything you need is in this envelope. Emily wasn't the type of person who left things unfinished. If she gathered all this evidence, she must have had a plan. I just didn't know what it was yet. The next morning, the phone rang. I answered immediately. Mr. Hayes. A calm voice said, "Yes, my name is Laura Bennett. I'm an attorney." I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "I believe your daughter Emily asked me to contact you if anything happened." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room felt suddenly brighter. "She's safe?" I asked quietly. "Yes," Laura said gently. "She's safe." The tension in my chest loosened for the first time all week. I sat down slowly. "Where is she?" "She's staying somewhere secure for the moment." Laura explained she wanted time to make sure the evidence was protected before anyone confronted Daniel. I glanced at the papers on the table. "He doesn't know about the documents," I said. "No," Laura replied, "and that's exactly why we have the advantage." Later that afternoon, I met Laura at her office. She was calm and professional, the kind of person who spoke carefully and never rushed a sentence. We placed the documents across the conference table. She reviewed them one by one. Occasionally she nodded. Sometimes she made quiet notes. After about 30 minutes, she leaned back in her chair. "This is very thorough," she said. "That's Emily," I replied. Laura gave a small smile. "Yes, she's been working on this for months." I looked down at the papers again. "How serious is it?" I asked. Laura folded her hands. "Very serious." She pointed to several loan documents. "These were taken out using Emily's identity." She tapped another page. "And these transfers show the money moving into accounts connected to Daniel." She paused before continuing. "This is fraud, identity theft, and potentially financial embezzlement." The words felt heavy, but they also felt strangely calm, like truth finally stepping into the room. 2 days later, everything began to move. The police opened a formal investigation. Banks were contacted. Financial records were frozen. Daniel didn't know any of this yet, according to Laura. That was important. "We let people talk when they believe they're safe," she said. "They reveal far more than they should." 3 days after that, the police requested Daniel come in for questioning. I wasn't there. But later that evening, the officer who had first entered Emily's apartment called me again. His voice carried a quiet satisfaction. "Mr. Hayes," he said. "Yes. Your daughter was very wise to keep those records." "What happened?" I asked. There was a brief pause. Daniel denied everything at first. I could almost imagine the smooth confidence in his voice, the polished explanations. But once we presented the documents, the officer continued, his story began to change. The officer's tone grew firmer. "We also discovered 2 additional accounts connected to him." My stomach tightened. "How much money?" I asked. Another pause. "Close to $800,000. I closed my eyes slowly. Emily had uncovered something much bigger than a few missing charges that evening. Laura called again. "It's moving faster than expected," she said. "The evidence is strong. What will happen to him?" I asked. "He will likely face criminal charges," she said. "And Emily will be cleared of any financial responsibility." I felt a deep breath leave my chest. For weeks, maybe months, she had been carrying the weight of this alone, and now it was finally lifting. 2 days later, I saw my daughter again. Laura arranged the meeting at her office. When Emily walked through the door, she looked tired, but she also looked stronger than I remembered. For a moment, we just stood there looking at each other. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. I held her tightly. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she said softly, "I'm sorry I worried you." I shook my head. "You protected yourself." I said, "And you protected the truth." She smiled faintly. "I didn't know who to trust anymore." "But you trusted yourself," I replied, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, The case moved forward quietly. Daniel was formally charged. Bank investigators uncovered additional fraudulent transactions. The total amount kept growing. Emily filed for divorce. The process was calm, orderly. No shouting, no public drama, just facts, documents, truth, and consequences, the kind of justice that arrives quietly but firmly. Several months later, Emily moved into a new apartment, a small place, bright windows, a quiet street sometimes. I visit her on Sunday afternoons. We drink tea by the window and talk. It's about simple things again. Work, neighbors, books. She's reading The Ordinary Rhythm of Life slowly returning. One evening, as the sun was setting through the window, Emily asked me something. "Dad," she said, "were you ever angry?" I thought about it for a moment. Of course, I'd been angry. Angry that someone had tried to use her. Angry that she had. Suffered in silence. But anger fades over time. Truth stays. I wasn't angry. I said finally, I was proud. She looked surprised. Proud? You didn't fight with noise, I said. You fought with patience. She smiled quietly. And for the first time in a long while, the world felt peaceful again. As I've grown older, I've learned something important about people. The loudest voices often appear. It's powerful, but real strength is usually quiet. It sits patiently. It gathers truth. And when the time comes, it simply reveals it. My daughter taught me that sometimes. The strongest people are the ones who say the least. But when they finally speak, the truth changes everything.